Yeah, so I picked Where'd You Go, Bernadette from 2019, starring Kate Blanchett, Billy Crudup, Emma Nelson. Quick logline. A loving mom becomes compelled to reconnect with her creative passions after years of sacrificing herself for her family. Her leap of faith takes her on an epic adventure that jumpstarts her life and leads to her triumphant rediscovery. I'm a big Kate Blanchett fan, and when this movie was announced, I was like, "Huh, what an odd pairing." I would never think of Linklater and Kate Blanchett in the same universe, because they just do very different things. And I guess I'd never seen Kate Blanchett, at least in her recent years, do something that feels more Linklatery. And
Hmm.
then to top that, this movie came out right when I had moved to Seattle. Actually, you had moved to Seattle not long
Yes.
ago before this movie came out, and
Yes.
this
Yes.
is a very beloved book that a lot of my friends told me about as I was moving to Seattle, that, oh, this is like a quintessential Seattle book set there and such. So the anticipation for this movie in my mind was high, but more from like a curiosity standpoint, because it just felt like such an oddball thing. And then of course the movie comes out and it's not very well reviewed, doesn't do really well, what have you. I watched it and I rewatched it again for this podcast. And I think I'm mixed on the movie. Like the movie starts and it takes a little bit to kind of really wrap yourself around what is Kate Blanchett doing, because she feels so alien like the way she talks. And at least my head is wandering to Blue Jasmine and all of her like quintessential Kate Blanchett characters who are,
Mm.
you know, sort of this heavy deep voice and like a specific look and sharp and blunt and what have you. And I'm like, what is this movie? And then as the movie goes on, leading up to the last act, it actually gets pretty interesting to see how this person is crumbling and what made them get to this place. And I think that's because I kept thinking, what made Linklater connect with this material
Mm.
and work with this actress? And I think the common shared thing there is this loss of creativity and passion in your life. As a creative, if you don't get to do that, what happens to you? And I think in that sense, this is a great character study. I think the problem is that, and this is where I bring my hot take, this plot and things have to happen, where there are interventions and this whole trip to Antarctica needs to happen. And then everything has to be tied in a neat bow as we're on the trip, where all realizations are happening really quickly with the husband and with Kate Blanchett's character and what have you. And it just doesn't really hang together. And the scope of the movie as you go to Antarctica is supposed to be much larger. And I don't know if this is Linklater's wheelhouse to kind of really transport you over there and let the place be the place that's the catalyst for these revelations. None of that is captured. I've not read the book. I'm sure that kind of comes through in the book. So I don't know. It feels like something just didn't quite work over here. At the same time, I'm very glad that they tried, and I'm glad that there's a Linklater Kate Blanchett collaboration, and especially the middle part of the movie. Like I said, touching on those themes of what happens to you when you can't create,
Mm.
that really resonated with me. And I think that's really well done. And at some point, when that starts to happen, you get what Blanchett is doing, in this kind of very oddball character. And I think Seattle is in its quirk and in its gray and rainness is captured really well in the movie. The oddball people around them and the role Microsoft and money plays in a world like that. But you also have your, Seattle hippy dippy sort of people around you as well. Like I think it captures that essence pretty well, which no surprise. Like Linklater has been a great kind of capture of places as well
Hmm.
without making it very heavy handed. Like you wouldn't say that, oh, Vienna is a third character in Before Sunrise. No,
Right.
you wouldn't
Right.
say that, but it's very much part of the movie, and it's captured in a very understated way. And I think the same happens here with Seattle. Curious if you'd watched this before.
I had not watched it. Similar to you, when I moved to Seattle, I'd heard of this book was also brought up to me. So I knew
Yeah.
this book existed. Did not read the book. Never knew this movie existed until you put it on the list for this
Oh.
podcast, to be honest. And I wish I never knew the movie existed. It
Yeah.
was awful. I think I will say though, I was wondering, like you were, like, why did Richard Linklater do it? But I think you nailed it. Like, this is the typical artist who lost their way, much like Dewey Finn in School of Rock. Like he's a musician and doesn't really know what he needs to do, and then finds, his track. And Kate Blanchett as an architect, so that's a form of art,
Mm-hmm.
and that I think was his way into this material. But yeah, I found the things that didn't work for me. One was a surprise that this is the characters in this movie are not typical Richard Linklater kind of like listless layabouts. They're super uptight, like NIMBY rich people who just don't typically fit into what you would expect in a Richard
Yeah.
Linklater movie. And I don't think he knows how to handle these characters. I mean, I found them all like deplorable, and I didn't like a single person in this
Yeah.
movie.
Quite annoying.
Like, every single one. Like the daughter sucked, the husband sucked, she was sucked, like the neighbors sucked. I'm like, I don't want any happiness for any of these people. These are miserable sad sacks who, so I didn't root for anyone. And yeah, I thought this is probably the worst I've ever seen Kate Blanchett do. And actually, maybe the only time I thought she put in a bad performance, like a flat out, like, this was terrible. I didn't get the affectation. I didn't believe the character at all. She didn't bring me into where you're supposed to care about her at some point, because it is her journey, right? She's
Mm-hmm.
going and you're supposed to feel sorry for her at some point, but I never did. And then I also felt that the narrative device that he was using of to give you backstory, we're going to have a character pull up a laptop and watch a YouTube video to explain the backstory. We're going to do this 3 different times, and you're going to watch over their shoulder because we don't know how else to tell you what this woman
Mm-hmm.
went through. I'm like, this is probably the laziest filmmaking I've ever seen. And I'm sort of surprised that he relied on that as a crutch. I mean, maybe I highly doubt that was in the book. It feels like the book, was, are able to do things different in writing, obviously, than you are in film. But they couldn't think of another way to organically explain what was going on instead of watching YouTube videos. Like, that was just surprising that Linklater, stooped that low. So yeah, I think the one thing that did work was, to your point, it did capture the feeling of Seattle, the aesthetics of it, the
Mm-hmm.
grayness, the rain, the sort of architecture, even though it wasn't shot there, of like what kind of Seattle looks like, but also what it feels like, what the people dress like, how the people
Mm-hmm.
are acting. And I definitely got maybe a little bit of PTSD from my experience in Seattle, which wasn't necessarily all around a positive one. And maybe that's another reason why this film, I'm like, yeah, I probably wish I'd never seen this. But
Uh,
if we were doing a Seattle episode, I would for
this
sure
will
be
be in
like,
there.
this should be discussed absolutely for like what Seattle feels like. So yeah, I just didn't. I don't think really anything in this. It was a complete misfire for me. And again, I'm not surprised I never heard of this movie before.
The thing you're talking about, the YouTube video, like I haven't read the book, but I've heard that the book is like that. Like there's a lot of, it relies a lot on like digital communication and
Oh,
such.
interesting.
And I wish that this was not, trying to be a faithful adaptation of the book. I
Hmm.
wish Linklater had sort of taken the ideas of the movie and just made a movie on his volition as opposed to just be faithful, because it's just hard to dramatize that kind of, digital communication in a movie. Is just not cinematic, and it just
Yeah.
comes off as, just like you said, lazy and not great. So I wish he'd done that. And yeah, Blanchett, yeah, it just feels like a caricature of a character. At some point, like I said, I got a little bit more on her wavelength of what was she trying to do, but it's very jarring. And I'm like,
Yeah.
who are you? And I get the issues at play, but the signature truth thing that we talk about with Linklater is just totally absent. That these people, they feel very, one dimensional. They're not really grounded in anything.
Hmm.
And if you don't get that, to your point, why would you root for them? I mean,
Right.
I
Right.
still rooted a little bit because I want people to get back to, their creative pursuits and whatever makes them happy. So I
Yeah.
got like a little bit of that, but
Yeah.
barely,
Yeah.
and I like they tried, but it's also kind of sad that this is, a bit of a waste as well. It could have been great because the themes are amazing, and
Hmm.
and there's something about, again, with the Hitman thing too. I guess with these sort of, I don't know, darker, quirky characters, this is not his bag. I
Hmm.
think he deals better with more earnest people who have their feelings on their heart, and they are, soulful and lost in life and trying to find something, not these sort of quirky, sharp edged kind of dark people. That's
Yeah.
not what he
Yeah.
does. And this movie should have been, I'll just say it, should have been done with by somebody else, and it would be an
Absolutely. Yeah.
amazing movie, and Kate Blanchett would be good in that movie. not in this one.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I just hated the characters so much. I don't really see how I could ever have empathy for the characters of this movie, but maybe it was the take
But
on the
that's
material with
okay,
the
you know. You're
director.
not supposed to like all characters. If it's done well, it could still be entertaining and
Oh yeah,
truthful,
yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah, I guess, but yeah, I didn't feel that the movie, I didn't feel the truth in it. Yeah,
Yeah,
with anyone involved, any one of the journeys here or who this person was, like she felt more like an archetype than
exactly.
a real human being, so that her journey meant nothing to me.
Exactly.
Um,
Totally agree.
where'd you
Where'd
go,
you go,
Bernadette?
Bernadette? Literally, where'd you go? You
Yeah, well,
know,
the answer to that is I don't care as long
I
as you're
don't
not
care.
here. Just leave, Bernadette. I don't care where you go. Just don't let the door hit you on the way out.
You didn't like all the vests people wore in the movie? Everybody has a vest in the
They got their
movie,
little vests on. Yeah.
like Seattle people do, you know? I was like, oh my
Exactly.
gosh, everybody has a vest and nobody's washed their hair.
They nailed the costumes.
Yep,
Yeah. Actually, maybe that was the only part of the movie that worked for me. Whoever was the costume designer, he or
they nailed
she
it.
nailed the aesthetic of like, okay, I do feel like I'm in the Pacific Northwest because of what the people are wearing. They did a great job of capturing
Yeah.
that reality and truth. Unlike the Antarctica stuff, where several scenes it was clear they were standing on a rock with a green in front of a green screen,
Oh,
and
also
it took me
that
out. I was
just
like, oh no, like
doesn't
really,
work.
this is so bad.
This is so bad. And again, I wish they just interpreted the movie differently and not
Yeah.
just try to be so faithful. Or go to Antarctica and film it there. I mean, I
Yeah.
always say go to the real place, or at least go
Right.
to, I don't know, Iceland or somewhere where it's
Yeah.
cold.
Yeah. Not like a Burbank lot or wherever they probably, maybe
Yeah.
they shot, I don't know where they shot this, but well, they shot it in Canada. The exteriors, I think, were doubling for Seattle because I was like, these two buildings don't look exactly right. And I looked it up and it was filmed in Canada, I think
Okay, that
Vancouver or
makes
something. So
sense.
maybe they were on a Vancouver soundstage, but I don't know. No good. Hi there, it's Alex. If you like the review and discussion Karan and I just had, make sure you subscribe to our channel, Movies That Shaped Us, to get full episodes. Every other Wednesday, Karan and I review a new release and then discuss 6 other movies made by that film's actor or director and how they shaped us. Subscribe right now or follow our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts via the link in the description below. Hope you join us for the journey.